A quick question. How many of you have talked to a Jew today? A couple of you. So none of you prayed. You got it. So, do you get what like if you prayed, okay, so the two dudes up the front prayed. If you're praying to God, you're praying to a Jew. Now that's offensive to lots of Western sensibilities and Aussie sensibilities. And you say, well, I know Jesus was Jewish, but how can you say God is Jewish? Okay, well, you're all super smart. So let me take you on give you a 30-second introduction, a little theology of the incarnation and Trinitarian theology. When Yahweh, the great God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, wrapped himself up in humanity and stepped onto the stage of human history in the person of the Jew, the Jewish rabbi, first century Rabbi Jesus, God enfleshed, made himself flesh, and he came and he was conceived as a Jew, born a Jew, raised a Jew, performed his ministry and his miracles as a Jew, was rejected, suffered, died as a Jew. He rose again as a Jew. And then what happened after Jesus' resurrection and his appearances on earth? What happened then? He ascended into heaven as a Jew. And where is the Rabbi Jew, the Jew Jesus? Where is he now? Seated at the right hand of God. And the Jew Jesus, we believe in Christian theology, was the second member of the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Bible. God the Holy Spirit. I'm just joking. So the humanity of Jesus and the Jewishness of Jesus, the Bible tells us and Christian theology tells us, was taken up into the very divine being. That's how humanity is redeemed, we believe. That God comes into our world and then takes us into his, to envelop us in the communion of love that is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And if you want to participate in the communion of love that is Father, Son, and Spirit, then you are going to participate in a communion with a Jew. Just thought I'd suggest that you think about that a little. It does your head in, right? Maybe you've never heard it put that way. You see, if you don't grapple with the essential Jewishness of Christianity, and that Jesus was Jewish, the first century church was all Jewish, the first century documents that we call the Bible are Jewish, are inexplicable apart from the Hebrew scriptures, you can't understand your faith. One of my great concerns and my experience observing Christians in the Western world, in the Protestant evangelical world that I suspect most of you are from and I'm from, is we have de-Judaized our faith. Okay, that is, we've taken Christianity and we've taken it away from its history in first century Israel and the Old Testament, which is a word I hate, the Hebrew scriptures. And what then happens is we turn Christianity into essentially a Greek philosophy, a set of ideas. So then Christianity becomes two ways to live and a set of ideas. That's not getting my good side now. Or should it be that side? Or should it be? No, we won't go there. When you strip out the Jewishness of Jesus and you embrace what Brian said is this view of replacement theology, like God had plan A was the Jews and they all screwed it up. And the way it gets, you probably have been taught this, well, Judaism was all about legalism. I will obey the law, do what's right, and if I do what's right, eventually God will accept me. But of course, we all know that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. God. So even the Jews stuffed up and they couldn't work their way to God. So therefore, plan B, Jesus had to come and provide forgiveness because we couldn't earn our way to heaven. That's a Protestant heresy that is unsupported by the Bible. But we'll get to that at another time. And I say that because you take this, the Bible right from the get-go is never ever about Jewish people trying to earn their way to heaven. It's always about God coming into the world and choosing a bunch of ratbag people who are no different to any other people. I'm going to choose you guys. I'm going to choose Abraham, who was like a Bronze Age nobody in Nowheresville. And he says, through you, this God of creation of the world, I'm going to work through these people and I'm going to do something spectacular. I'm going to defeat evil at a cosmic level. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to do it to this bunch of people, right? And it's always been about what God is doing by grace in the world. And then God he chooses these people, he gives them a bunch of promises. And he says, guess what, you Jews, I haven't chosen you because you're particularly smart or good looking. That was just for the South African Jews. But for the rest of the Jews, you're just ordinary bunch of people. And I know you're going to screw up and you're going to reject me and you're going to want to be just like everyone else and you're going to be annoying and you're going to be irreligious. But I'm going to choose you and I'm going to love you. And nothing you can do can make me love you anymore. And nothing you can do can make me love you any less. And so God makes a whole bunch of promises to these people. And he says, nothing will ever cause me to change my mind about you. Okay? Nothing. Now here's the thing, right? If God has changed his mind about the Jews and gone, I made these promises, but I don't really like you that much. You screwed up one too many times. So now I'm going to go to plan B. Well, if God can do that to the Jews, what hope have you or I got that he won't do that to you or me? Right? Because you're a mess. Like, I know you're a mess. And you know why I know you're a mess? Because I'm a mess. I'm a mess, you're a mess, we're all a mess. So what is this fact that you're a mess and I'm a mess going to mean I'm at risk that God could change his mind? No. Because God is utterly committed to the Jewish people, and therefore when you, by grace, through the sovereign work of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit of God, get drawn into the faith of Israel, when you get drawn into God's love, nothing can ever remove you from that place of being loved by God. That's Romans 11. And that means that all of Israel are going to be drawn into this somehow. And when we lose that, we turn Christianity into just a set of ideas or an inner psychological experience that says, I've got to feel God. I personally have to have this deep sense of God in my life and this inner conviction and decision. And if I don't have that, then maybe God's abandoned me, or maybe I've abandoned God. And we can make Christianity just this narrow set of ideas. And we lose this the historicity, the earthiness, the humanity of God that will change your life and change my life if we'll let it. And then you reduce Christianity to two ways to live: to coming to church, to keeping your parents happy, maybe to trying not to have sex before you get married, because that's really, really bad. And maybe, you give a little bit of your money away and you try not to be too greedy, because that's really, really bad. And apart from that, you just go out and live your life. When we understand the essential Jewishness of the scriptures and we allow the scriptures to shape our worldview and the whole way we approach reality, we start to discover that in God's plan, this world is an amazing place. And He has an incredible adventure in store for you. And it's far more than you could even begin to hope or imagine sitting where you are. And it doesn't mean you've got to be some brilliant, extraordinary person. It's just you are extraordinary and amazing, and we're caught up in this great adventure. So what I want to do, that was my introduction. It's my way of saying hello. And that gives you, that's Romans 11. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, show me where it says that in the text. And if we had another 10 hours or 20 hours, we could work through all of this carefully and closely. But I want to give you the big picture, and I want to say that because it's vital. And now what I want to do is unpack for you, if that's all the case, I want to help you understand why it is that I think so many good Christian people in Australia are naive and anti-Semitic and apathetic and don't support Israel and don't have the courage to get involved in politics. And I want to do all of that in about 20 minutes by giving you a history of philosophy and theology and the nation state of Israel in 20 minutes, and then tell you where we're going after that. Does that sound like a plan? And I think we've got till 11 o'clock, is that right? Do I get an amen for that? No. Okay, so here's something you need to know about me. Full disclosure, I'm a Jew. My mum was a German Jew, fled the Holocaust in 1938. She grew up with her parents in Frankfurt, Germany. So I am a second generation Holocaust survivor. And this is not an abstract reality for me. Like what is going on in the world today, and the suffering of the world has always been incredibly real for me. The reason I'm a follower of Jesus is because my Jewish mum married my dad, who was a Roman Catholic. My mum and her parents, my mother was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor. Some similarities between diaspora Jews and diaspora, Chinese communities. You all have to be doctors or anyone here studying medicine? Yeah, repent of that. No. You're all accountants and engineers. Okay, that's great. Our cultures are very similar, which is pretty funny. So mum married my dad, who was a doctor. My mum was a doctor. My dad wasn't. My dad was a mercenary in Africa, and he smuggled emeralds and diamonds. And he's a professional gem thief. He was a crook. And so I was, but my mum was very secular. My dad was very secular. It wasn't, you don't get to be particularly religious as a missionary or an emerald and diamond smuggler. So I like to say I was born and circumcised a Jew, baptized and confirmed a Catholic, and then ordained as an Anglican. Because out of the crazy background I had, I had a deep encounter with Jesus as a 15-year-old in an Anglican youth group. I'd never been to a Protestant church. And some friends at school in Cape Town invited me to go along. And so I went along because the youth group had something that my school didn't have. Can anyone guess what that was? Girls. 100%. That's right. Youth groups are like sitcoms. Okay? They both are driven along by unresolved sexual tension. And they both end badly when the sexual tension is resolved. I'll let you think about that for a bit. That always struck me as a funny joke. Clearly not so funny out here. Okay. Tough crowd. So I went to this youth group because there were girls, and I met girls, and they were lovely. But I met God, and He was even better. And Jesus changed my life in an unbelievably powerful way. In the middle of this crazy upbringing that I'd had, full of living in the shadow of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, with my family having lost everything, having been a refugee from Germany, and then we'd fled from Zimbabwe, the war in Rhodesia with nothing, grown up in the context of great violence and suffering and heartache. My dad was in jail, and then I discovered at the heart of the universe was a God who loved me enough to wrap himself up in flesh, step into the world, and embrace me with his love and heal me and make me whole and draw me into his family. And he could do that for me as a little Jewish guy with a Catholic dad and a very confused life. And it changed everything, and it continues to change everything. But for me, it was very clear Christianity was Jewish. So I went into medicine, gave that up, came and studied theology, been an Anglican pastor for 30 years. But my life changed. And one of the things I've always been concerned about was the tendency of Christians to reduce Christianity just to a Sunday observance or an intellectual set of ideas. Because as I said before in my opening introduction, Christianity it's Jewish, and in the Jewish worldview, when you read the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, it describes faith as a walk, a halak, like you walk your faith. You don't think it primarily. It's about a whole way of being in the world. Now, it has immense intellectual components, and the Jewish community are full of debate and argument, but what matters is how you live. Not how you behave in church, but how you live, how you treat your family, your kids, and how you organize your society. So that's vital. So on October the 9th, so I've always been concerned about that and been involved in politics and all kinds of things. On October the 9th, 2023, I'd watched, this is 2 days after October 7. Anyone know what happened on October 7, 2023? Do you all know what happened then? Okay, Hamas, jihadist death cult in Gaza on the southern border of Israel, attacks Israel. Thousands of, about 3,000 Hamas warriors, armed people enter Israel in about 30 or 40 different locations, followed by another 3,000 or 4,000 civilians from Gaza who just pour into Israel to loot and to rape and to kill. And they commit the greatest atrocity against Jewish people since the Holocaust. 1,200 people killed, 250 odd taken hostage, tortured, brutalized, 20 of whom are still in tunnels inside Gaza. And this was horrendous. So I watched all this unfold on Saturday the 7th. And like every other Jewish person in the world, just deeply traumatized that this could happen in Israel by these jihadist terrorists. Sorry, I am battling a bit of a cold. 2 days later, the 9th, there was a rally that ended up on the steps of the Opera House. I don't know if you remember that, seeing that, these jihadists burning Israeli flags, Aussie flags, shouting, gas the Jews, kill the Jews, fuck the Jews, all that kind of stuff down on the Opera House, full of hate. My daughter, Freya, some of you might know Freya from Instagram and university and the media and Sky News and so on. She's typically the more famous and good-looking of the two of us. Freya called me from Sydney Uni and said, "Hey, Dad, the Palestinians are planning a rally against Israel and we've got to do something about it." And so I thought we should do something about it. So I called the police. And they said to me, "Mr. Leach, we're warning the Jews to stay out of the city today for their safety." This was the day they were going to light the Opera House sails up in blue and white as an act of solidarity with Israel, right? So horrible atrocities just happened. The blood hadn't yet dried in southern Israel. The bodies were still burning in the cars. The embers were charred and the cars were still burning in the south. They were chasing terrorists around in the south of Israel on the morning of October the 9th. And these guys are going to protest and rally in support of Hamas and against Israel. And then the police said to me, "Mr. Leach, if you come into the city, we can't guarantee your safety." And then they said, "And if you come in and try and do anything, we will arrest you in order to prevent a breach of the peace." And so I thought to myself, I've been here in Australia for 30 years. I'm a migrant like many of you or your parents. And I've picked up some of the vernacular, the local language. You know what vernacular is? So I hung up the phone and I thought to myself in good Aussie style, "Bugger that." I said, that's not going to happen. This is Australia. We're not going to give the center of our city over to jihadists who hate our civilization, hate the Jews, hate Israel, hate Christianity, and are a death cult. So I put on a clerical shirt, looked all religious. I played squash, got my squash bag rolled up in an Israeli flag, put that in my squash bag, went to St. Andrew's Cathedral. If you know the city, there's the Anglican Cathedral, Town Hall, and in between is the square where these rallies start. About 1,000 of these guys were all there chanting their hatred. So as that got going, I took an Israeli flag out and I stood on the steps of the cathedral and I took a stand waving the flag. And I did that not just for Israel, though it was, but I did that for Australia. Because I thought what has to happen is that Australians have to realize that this fight that we are in is not just Israel's fight, that the war in Israel is being played out here on the streets of Sydney. And about 1,000 eyes turned on me, a bunch of keffiyeh-wrapped thugs chased me out of the square. I beat a hasty retreat around the cathedral, then ran up Bathurst Street, ran onto George Street, hid behind a police van while the cops dispersed the crowd who were threatening to slit my throat. Why did I do that? Because I could see the great risk in Australia is that we repeat, the Christians and everyday Aussies repeat the mistakes of the Christians in Germany in the 1930s. Quick history lesson. Germany was a very Christian country. At the time Hitler was rising to power, about 20% of German Christians supported Hitler. About 20% opposed Hitler. The middle 60% of Christians were all just like, oh no, I don't want to be political, I don't want to get involved, I just want to, say my prayers and make my money and be a good citizen and not rock the boat. Do you know the most common day in the late 1930s and 1940s, the most common day in Germany when the authorities would round up Jews? What day do you think they would go and round them up and take them off into concentration camps? What was the most common day, do you reckon they do that? Saturday? No? Sunday. Why Sunday? Because the authorities would call the church leaders in the village or the area they were going to and say, keep your people in church this morning. And all the good Christians would be in church and they'd sing their songs and they'd say their prayers so they wouldn't have to hear their neighbors being rounded up and taken off to concentration camps. And it seemed to me, the real risk in Australia is that Christians in Australia have that same attitude. We don't want to get involved, we don't want to be political, and we don't want to stand up for the Jews, or really for anything much. We just want to, probably won't work in this crowd, but your typical Aussie wants, beers, footy and maths, I don't know what you guys want. I can't even imagine. I'm assuming no one here watches maths. Hands up if you watch Married at First Sight. Hey, okay. The rest of you are all studying your engineering and accounting. That's fine. Working 3 jobs and getting ahead, which is awesome. Much better than watching maths. But the trick is, the danger is we're going to be like Germany. And we're going to sleepwalk into a culture that is destructive and evil. So I did that because I wanted to wake the church up. And then what happened was we started running rallies around the country. Wayne here and I were sitting around at church one Sunday night and said, we've just got to do something. And we connected with friends in England and a Jewish fellow in the city. And so we ran our first rally, led by Christians, bringing Jews and Christians and everyday people together. And we had 10,000 people turn up at the Domain in Sydney. And then we thought it'd be a good idea to do this all around the country. So then we did that, and then by the middle of last year, I finished up at the church where I'd been a rector for 10 years and said, God, this incredible sense of God calling me into this work to build a movement to combat anti-Semitism, to wake up the Christians in particular to say, we have a divine mandate and calling to work for the common good of Australia. And the particular issue we've got to address first up is hatred and the culture, the battle, the clash of civilizations we face with jihadist Islam. But there are many other battles we face, so we've got to wake the church up. Let's have a look. Hello. So this was what we set up. We wanted to make anti-Semitism unthinkable. We set up this organization, Never Again Is Now, and we want to make anti-Semitism, that is racist hatred of Jewish people, unthinkable. And how do we want to do it? By renewing our commitment to Western civilization. Now, the culture, the worldview that actually has made Australia the wonderful country that it is, the country to which your parents emigrated and you happily live, and where I emigrated, and which has been unbelievably good to me. So we want to renew, the way to stop hatred and racism in Australia, and particularly Jewish hatred, is by renewing that. So here's the problem we are facing. Western civilization is under threat. I don't know if you realize this, but even today, the government just announced that they're expelling the ambassador from Iran because the Iranian regime were behind a number of the anti-Semitic attacks, the burning of Jewish synagogues in Australia. So the jihadist Iranians and their proxies are working all around the Western world to divide and conquer and overthrow Western civilization because they have a vision of a global Islamic caliphate. And we are naive about this and asleep at the wheel. We're also being attacked by the radical Marxists who've never given up, even though they've been shown to be the most destructive force in humanity in the last 150 years. But somehow they believe when they practice it properly, communism, Marxism, socialism will bring in heaven on earth. Anti-Semitism is a warning sign. Right now, it's a warning sign that something's wrong in our culture. Right now, my car has a warning sign flashing on its dashboard that says, my car is overdue for an oil change and service. That's been flashing for about a month. Initially, the message was, your car is soon due for a service. Then it was, your car is due for a service. And now it's flashing, your car is overdue for a service. So I'm just ignoring that. Eventually, what's going to happen? Well, my wife will take it in to get serviced. No. What will happen is my engine will blow up if I don't address it. The problem is what's going on under the hood. And anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews that we see on our campuses, on our streets, week by week in these marches, is a warning sign saying, hey guys, there's something fundamentally broken under the hood of Western civilization, and we are being attacked. And jihadist extremism is entering the mainstream. And I'm going to... what time do we finish? What time?
9:30, but...
One time for questions. Yeah, okay. So here's a little lecture in political philosophy. You may not have thought much about politics. The way we want to make anti-Semitism unthinkable is by shifting the Overton window. And I can give you these slides later. The Overton window is a way of understanding public policy, and it's the range of policies politically acceptable to the mainstream population. You see, public policy follows public opinion. Okay? Government policy follows public opinion, not the other way around. We like to think the governments will lead us. Well, they're only going to lead you where they think you want to go. So what was unthinkable becomes acceptable to the mainstream population. And so you can see there's an example down there. You see things, an idea was unthinkable, then it becomes radical, then acceptable, then sensible, then popular, then public policy, right? So I'll give you an example that's not about Israel and the Jews, same-sex marriage. 10 years ago, it was unthinkable that, or 30 years ago, it was unthinkable that same-sex marriage would be legislated. You know, you could be gay, but the idea that two blokes could be married would be, you know, unthinkable. Then it became a radical idea. So some people believed it, but they were the radicals. But then it became broadly acceptable. And then what happened? It seemed to a lot of people to be sensible. Well, of course we should allow gay people to be married because we want everybody to have the freedom to be miserable, right? Just trying to see if you're still awake. We want everyone to have the freedom to be loved. Okay, to love, it's all about love. It became sensible, then it became popular, and then we have the plebiscite, and it becomes government policy. Okay, that's how these things work. You can track how ideas shift. Now, what's happening in our culture is ideas about the Jews are shifting as our ideas about Western civilization shift. And what we have to do is make sure that the kind of racism that we're seeing on the streets of Sydney is utterly unthinkable. You know, I mean, you guys weren't here, but in the good old days in Australia, used to talk about Indigenous people in terribly racist terms. All right, that's unthinkable now. You couldn't do it. We used to talk about, I don't know if it still happens in the schools, but in the good old days in Australia, and certainly where I grew up in Africa, the way we talk about gay people and lesbians was terrible. Now it's unthinkable to use even that language, apart from, American stand-up comics. You just don't use that language. And that's to do that for the Jewish people as a way of combating racism is, I think, a powerful act of public witness for Christians. And we'll get into that in a little while. So there are three sets of ideas that fuel anti-Semitism and that are critical, and they shape how you, sitting in the pews here tonight, read the Bible and understand life and understand your own self and politics and faith. And so you've got to understand where we've come from in order to chart a course going forward. So I gather last time here you all talked about cultural Marxism, so I don't have to go over that again, but I will shortly. Briefly, we all know Karl Marx, binary way of understanding all of reality, that the way the world moved to utopia, the way you got heaven and earth, was by the oppressed, who were the workers, in the process of revolution, overthrowing the bourgeoisie, the capital owners. And that process of revolution would bring in heaven on earth, a very religious utopian view of reality. Of course, that proved not to be the case because the workers just liked accumulating capital themselves and getting rich. And so economically it didn't work, but the Marxists are a particularly persistent bunch. So they abandoned many of them abandoned the economic framing of it, but they kept the fundamental framing that all of reality can be understood as a conflict, a battle between two groups of people, the oppressors and the oppressed. And when you see all of the world like that, it becomes a set of glasses through which you see and make sense of reality. So how do I understand the gender roles? What's wrong with the world if you're a third-wave feminist, or you're a neo-Marxist feminist? What's wrong with the world? Well, women are being oppressed. You women as a class, as a whole subgroup of beings, are being oppressed. And who is oppressing you?
White men.
The patriarchy, and particularly white men like me. I am a representative of the patriarchy who's oppressive. And heaven on earth will come when the matriarchy overthrows the patriarchy. And, well, we all know that that's nonsense, right? Life doesn't work like that. If you realize when you marry someone, you realize it's a war. And life is a brutal battle, and you marry someone and you go to battle with your own. The war is firstly with your own selfishness. And then it's two selfish people who are joined together in this covenant, going to war against the forces of chaos and destruction in the world around them. And there's no room for narrow, simple, binary thinking. Well, all the problems in the world are men. And if only we got rid of men, then the world would be easy. It's nonsense. Okay, but then we changed that. The radical environmental movement, you can understand this. Some of you probably grew up with this in school. Environmental catastrophe we're all facing. So who's being oppressed in the radical green movement? The earth itself, Mother Nature, Gaia. And who's the oppressor? Us, all as a species. Okay, that's the framing. Now, you add another little guy. Has anyone heard of Frantz Fanon? Okay. Frantz Fanon wrote a book called The Wretched of the Earth. He was an Algerian, so Algeria is a country in North Africa, an Algerian psychotherapist who took Marxist thinking, and he wrote about the experience of the Algerians in a civil war against the French colonialists who occupied and controlled their country. And Fanon's argument was that the key struggle in human reality was between the colonial oppressors and the indigenous oppressed, and that the experience of being oppressed by the colonial powers had such a deeply psychologically and sociologically disturbing and deep effect on the indigenous people that the only way they could find freedom was by overthrowing the oppressors through violence. So violence was necessary, good, and justified on the path to utopia. So every time you hear anyone say about October 7 or about any terrorist group, resistance is justified. I mean, you might have heard this when they talk about Hamas and the war in Gaza. They'll say, oh, well, you know, the problem is October 7 was justified because it happens in a context, because the poor, plucky Palestinians have been so oppressed for so long by evil, wicked Israel that they have to rape and kill and slaughter and maim because of what has been done to them. And if they do that enough, then they'll overthrow these wicked, evil Israelis, and then Palestine will be free. And when Palestine is free, guess what? The whole world will be free. That's Frantz Fanon. It's Frantz Fanon. And this is probably an exaggeration, but let's run with it for rhetorical effect. Almost every humanities lecturer at UCID at some point either read or was taught by someone who'd read Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth and believed that framing. So now what happens, you see the whole world in these categories, and it's very easy then for people to say, plucky Palestinians, good, evil Israel, bad. Okay, then you add in 2,000 years of anti-Semitism. God's rejected the Jews because they rejected him. Christians replaced them. And they're just evil, wicked people. And look what they're doing in Gaza. It all makes perfect sense. Jew bad, Muslim good, Jew bad, Israeli bad, Palestinian good, violence is necessary and justified, bada boom, bada bing, the whole world will be free. This is, by the way, why you see groups, I don't know if you've seen them, the gays for Gaza, queers for Palestine. Have you seen those guys? Like, it's nuts, right? It's just like intellectually, like, the technical word is completely nuts. But it's not. When you understand their worldview, by the way, and what I'm trying to do, if we're going to ever want to change someone's mind, we need to understand and be able to articulate their reasons for what they do better than they do themselves. So a Queers for Palestine person will say, I know that they don't like gay people in Gaza. But it doesn't matter, because when Palestine is free, everyone will be free, because that's the path to utopia. And so I know even my freedom as a queer person in Australia, oppressed as I am by this tyrannical patriarchy of relentless acceptance and bending over backwards to accommodate me, but even all of that, I will be set free from that when the Palestinians are free, because that's the path to the new heavens and the new earth. And that's why queers support the struggle. Because it's not about them. It's about this struggle from colonial oppression, bringing freedom to the whole world. Now, that's the first set of ideas, very, very powerful. The second set of ideas, which I'll go over more quickly, though are very complicated, are the ideas of Arab nationalism and the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, you need to understand this. Well, you don't need to. I'd like it if you understood this. And it's all about me tonight. So, while all this Marxist Fanon colonial thinking was going on in Europe, These ideas were imported into the Arab world by Egyptian academics who were sent to study in Germany and in France, and brought these ideas back into Islamic thinking. And suddenly Islam itself begins to be transformed from a tribal religion into a nationalist force that is about restoring the Arab identity and is ensuring the Arab success over and against the Western colonial powers. And then that was then married with a group called the Muslim Brotherhood, again in Egypt. And the Muslim Brotherhood said, it's not just, the problem is, yes, we're being oppressed by the Western countries. We as Arabs are weak and poor and broke, and our countries are not great. Why is that? Why are the Christians outperforming us on every indicator? The reason is, said the Muslim Brotherhood, because we're not good enough Muslims. So the way to overcome the colonial oppressors, the way to bring about the revolution that would bring in heaven on earth, is to become like super conscientious Muslims. Because Islam at its heart is a form of prosperity theology, which we're all prone to. Like, when you're having a shitty life, it's because you're a shitty Christian. If only you obeyed more, said your prayers more, gave more, had better faith, then your life wouldn't be quite as crappy, right? And in Islam, that is exactly the problem they face. In Islam, the teaching is, if you follow perfectly in the footsteps of Muhammad, and you follow to every last degree and step exactly what is taught about Muhammad in the Quran, in the foundational documents, the Quran, the Sunnah, the Hadith, the sayings and the rules and the life of Muhammad, then you'll be better than anyone else. So why isn't Egypt better than England? Because you're not good enough Muslims. So you get an Islamic revivalist movement married with Arab nationalism, infused by Marx and Fanon, and that lands in the Middle East, and that lands in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and it lands in Hamas, and that is the war that Israel is fighting against, and that lands in mosques in Lakemba, and in our country, 1 million Muslim people, 20% of whom believe, according to the CIA statistics, that the path to utopia, the path to peace on earth, is for every single person, every one of us here, to submit to Allah. And if we all submit to Allah, then there'll be peace. No one will fight with each other. Now, of course, if you refuse to submit to Allah, I'll kill you, and then we'll have peace. Because you won't be fighting against Allah anymore. You'll be dead. And we'll establish a global caliphate, and the world will be perfect. It's a utopian vision. And the problem is, Israel is in the way of that. Israel stubbornly refuses to go away. And here's the thing about Islam. In Islamic theology, once Islam has conquered a country, a piece of territory, it forever and for always belongs to Allah and to the Muslim world. And so the land of Israel has been occupied by the Ottomans, the Islamic Ottoman Empire, for 400 years, by a bunch of caliphs before that. And so the idea that it could now exist as a Jewish state is an affront to Islam, and every Muslim is duty-bound to recapture that land, and Spain as well, Anatolia, because that was also once Muslim. So how the heck, if that's all the case, how the heck has our culture just rolled over and allowed ourselves to be taken over by such ideas? Well, that takes us to the post-1948 consensus, and I'll do this in about, 3 minutes. Between 1914 and 1948, how many people did we slaughter in the world? Between 1914, start of the First World War, end of World War II, how many people were slaughtered in the world? Give or take. Let's pretend it's not a rhetorical question. Stick your hand up. It's okay to be wrong. Yep? 3 million? Yep? 100 million? No. Oh, yeah. Very excited over there. Very excited. You've been going to too many property auctions, I tell you. Yeah. You're like, man, we'll just go straight to the 500 million. See you all off, you lowly peasants, you. Conservatively, 130 million, 120, 130 million. Top range estimate, 200 million people. That is industrial scale slaughter. Look at the roll of honor in a church like this. A whole bunch of the young men went off to war and never came back. Right? Like 25, if you imagine here, a quarter or a third of all you young guys go off tomorrow on a train to go fight overseas and you don't come back. Okay, it's terrible. So out of that, in 1948 and the early 50s, the big question in our culture was, how can we stop ourselves slaughtering each other again? Okay, so there was a famous book written in 1948 by a philosopher of science called Karl Popper. Have any of you heard of Karl Popper? They don't teach that in engineering. Okay, Karl Popper. I only know that because Brian's an engineer, so I'm just making fun of engineers here. I love engineers. They keep buildings up. Popper wrote a book called The Open Society. He taught at the London School of Economics, and his most famous Jewish student became a billionaire. Guess what his name was? George Soros, who set up the Open Society. And what Popper and Soros and the Western world decided was to prevent ourselves slaughtering each other, we had to be three things. We had to be open, we had to be weak, we had to be disenchanted. By open, we had to have open borders. We have to be open to each other. Like if I open my home to you and my heart to you, then I'm not going to saddle up and go to war and kill you. So you jolly Germans, open up your borders and bring the French in and enjoy their baguettes and their wine. And you Frenchies, you open up your borders. Well, you did that. Okay. So you open up your borders and just understand we're all the same. There's no ultimate truth. Everybody has their own aspect of own take on reality, and I need to be open to it all. Okay? I need to be so open that that even reality itself doesn't close my mind to anything. So, just because I have a penis and XY chromosomes doesn't mean that I'm not a woman. Because I'm open, if you want to claim that, I'm open to whatever you want to believe is true. Because the alternative is, if I'm closed and I've got closed borders and a closed mind, then I'm going to saddle up and go to war and kill you, and I'm going to slaughter everyone. I'm going to be back in the 1930s. And that's terrible. And I've got to be weak. By weak, I mean strong leaders, strong countries, strong religions go to war with each other. So after 1948, the Catholic Church reinvented itself in the Second Vatican Council. They introduced an idea from a theologian called Karl Rahner. In the Catholic Church, they were hardcore, a bit like Sydney Anglicans, only seriously hardcore. And the Catholics used to say, there's no salvation outside the church. Dude, if you're a Protestant, if you're a Hindu, if you're a Muslim, you're anything except baptized a Catholic, straight to hell. You don't pass go, you don't get $200, you go straight to hell, that's it. No salvation outside the church. Like, that's a strong faith, right? And people go to war and kill each other when they have strong faith like that. So what Rahner did, he said, look, let's think about this. Maybe you're a Muslim, but really, he introduced this idea, you're really an anonymous Christian. You're really a Christian. You don't know it, but you really are. So therefore, I don't have to kill you because you're really just like me. You're an anonymous Catholic. And so they weakened that. That's part of the church. And our whole society did that. You can be a Christian, but be a weak Christian. Reduce your Christianity going to church on a Sunday. Make it private. Don't try and control things. Don't try and influence the culture. Don't try and shape public debate. Don't try and build a national identity around your faith. Heavens forbid. You've got to be weak. so you don't saddle up and go to war. And then you've got to be disenchanted, which is you've got to remove this idea from our culture that there are grand narratives, grand callings to fight for, that God has a plan for your life, that you're going to pursue meaning and purpose by fighting for your family, for your honor, for your country, for your blood, for your soul. You don't want that. Like, no, listen. Just, you might fight with someone over that. So just settle down, be happy with going to university, getting a job, marrying, having a kid or two, paying off your mortgage, settling into a retirement home, going to a nursing home, and then slipping off to die peacefully without causing too much of a fuss. And that's an okay life for you, isn't it? That was the post-1948 consensus. Disenchanted, weak, and open. Okay? That's Australia. That's how we've operated. The problem with that is the Muslim world did not get the memo that that's how you should behave. This way of relating worked within Western civilization to stop Western Christian countries going to war. And praise God, it was great. But no one else got the memo, and what we are facing now is a threat to this. So why do we accept jihadists in Australia? Because we're open. Who's to say Islam is different to Christianity? We're not better than them. We won't hold fast to our values and our culture and our country. So, open, weak, disenchanted. This explains everything. Like, I'll just make a point, and then we'll go to the final slide. Donald Trump is the first president of the United States who is a 21st century president who's not operating out of that post-1948 consensus. Closed borders, truth's truth, peace through strength, nationalist, loves his country, happy to say America's the best country in the world, unashamed about it, and that the values that America holds are the best values in the world. Now, whatever else you think about Trump, he's not a post-1948 liberal president. So we are seeing, we have to grapple with this. This is why we are in such a mess in this country. And what we need to do, and what you need to do as young Christians, is you need to saddle up and say, I need to understand all of this. Now I need to take my Bible, and I need to take my church community, and I need to say, how are we going to organize our society and our country in a world of strong gods, in a world where we are not going to be weak and open and disenchanted, but where we're going to act in the world in love, so that this country remains a country where we are safe and free. And that's, Christians need to lead that. We need a renewal of the Bible. We need to help people understand that this civilization we have is not built on openness to any view. It's built on the truths of Scripture. And that's another whole talk. That we believe Western civilization is the greatest achievement of our species. I really believe that. Now, you may not, but I do. And the truth matters. And we need institutional renewal of faith. The greatest thing Australia needs is a renewal of faith in the churches. People need to come back to God. Now, how are they going to come back to God? Well, they need to know Christians. How are they going to get to know Christians? Well, they're not going to come to church. You've got to go to them. You've got to love them and serve them. We need a renewal of family, to honor family. And so here's the thing. You guys need to get involved in a political party, political parties, to advocate and make sure that the people who make public policy do so in ways that are pro-family, pro-natal. You guys need to have lots of kids. And we need to create an economic system where that's possible. Okay? And that's a Christian thing to do. You read the scriptures and you go, this is just straight out of the Bible. Read the book of Deuteronomy. That lays out the blueprint for how to organize society. It shaped our whole Western civilizational understanding of law, common law, parliamentary democracy, constitutional monarchy, and how we organize family and life together. It's all there. And we need to get back to that. We need a renewal of church and shul. renewal of community, and we need a renewal of our love for this country. There's no Australian flags hanging in this church. I think there should be. And that's a controversial thing. You guys are lots of you, as I see here, are second-generation migrants. I came here 30 years ago. We as Christians need to lead this cultural renewal because we do it from a place of love, not fear or hatred or racism. And we do it because we love the people around us, and we don't want to become a racist, tribal culture. We want to be a country where everyone can be safe and free. And we do it as an act of love, not just for those immediately around us, but for our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, because love is not bound by time. The actions you take, the political involvement you have now, will shape the kind of country this is in 40 years' time. So if you want to love your grandkids, and you probably haven't even thought about having kids yet, some of you, but if you want to love your grandkids or my great-grandkids, then get involved in this battle for our country, for civilization. Have a vision of the kind of Christian country we want Australia to remain and to become. And Christians need to lead that because we serve a king who changed the world by loving self-sacrifice, by dying and rising again, and that's the path we're called to follow. So that's it. I'm going to take questions for the next 3 minutes.